All right, Alex, should we get started?
Yeah, I'm ready. Are you?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So, hello everyone. Today, the Institute of Electronic Arts which is dedicated in support of the contemporary artists through its primary focus of residency programs. These residencies provide artists with opportunities to engage in vital research using electronic media, new technologies, and print media within fine arts disciplines, while also benefiting local artists, regionals, and global communities. In addition to residencies, the IEA supports evolving electronic art or electronic studio research labs, hosts national and international conferences, and encourages projects in experimental media arts, prints, and publications. The IAA residencies and public engagement are thanks to the Joseph Endowment and the New York State Council for the Arts. You can learn much more about the IEA since its founding in 1997 via our website and social media platforms. This talk is being moderated by myself, Alex, and my co-host, Mary. We are students at Alfred University participating in the Business of Art class, and Mary will talk a little bit more about Dustin.
Hi guys, I'm Mary. Hello Dustin.
Hi.
Dustin will be here in residence at Alfred from September 1st to the 13th. Dustin Loveland, he, they pronouns, is a non-binary printmaker turned dressmaker born in Los Angeles, California, and raised in rural Northeast Missouri. Loveland explores queer ancestry, fashion as a tool for placemaking, and crafting arrangements that formally embody a raison the
De
how do you
Vive.
pronounce that?
Sorry.
Will you pronounce it again?
Risen de Vive.
Oh, okay, thank you. A gratitude for life's unpredictability and the meaningful connections between people, their environments, and the things they create. Growing up queer in an art and fashion desert with strained familial relationships, he turned to watching online software tutorials and screen printing colorful t-shirts. The experience of designing digitally, transferring those images to print, and then wearing them allowed him to recognize print and fashion as ways to connect with others. Loveland earned his BFA in printmaking and art history from the Kansas City Art Institute in 2014 and has since worked across 3D scanning, architecture, and sewing industries. His work has been featured in fashion runways such as the 2019 Local Fashion Link and Kansas City Street Gallery. Oh, Kansas City Fashion Week, sorry. Recent exhibitions include Miss slash They Camaraderie 2024 at Charlotte Street Gallery. Is Emo Missouri?
Missouri. Yeah.
Missouri. Okay, thank you. And the Printmakers Guild of New York 2024 showcase in New York. Loveland was awarded the 54th Street Studio Residency by Collar Works in Cheshama and Troy, New York. Currently, he lives and works in upstate New York, where he co-runs a monthly studio critique group. We will link Dustin's Instagram so you can check out his work. So just check the chat and check it out.
So we plan on hearing from Dustin for about the next 40 to 45 minutes, and we'll see at the end, we will answer any questions. And for our audience, you can always paste any questions in the chat, and Mary and I will make sure to read them and convey them to Dustin. So we'll manage the chat. Thank you for everyone for being here and joining us. Thank you, Dustin, for your time, and I'll let you take it away.
Sweet. Thank you both, Mary and Alex, for that introduction. And I would also like to thank Miles and Brig with the IEA for supporting me while I've been here as a resident. It's been very meaningful. I know it's going to have a lasting impact for me after I go back home. So thank you. Uh, I kind of I dissected this presentation into two parts. One is called fast, part two is slow. I just feel like I envision when I look back at my creative practice, the first part just really felt like I was just chugging things out, not with like a lot of intention. And I was also trying to financially survive. So I feel like that's kind of why I would section the first part as the fast, and we'll get to the slow part later. Um, so to start off, I kind of grew up with a lot of video games in my life. I feel like there's one of two things in my childhood that have really affected my like my aesthetic of my work. And the main one was video games. So, like they said in the introduction, I grew up in rural Northeast Missouri and I did not like even live in a town. I lived like outside of a small town about 30 minutes. So I was not really easily able to get to, hang out with friends or, talk to neighbors a lot. Like I really was like alone with my sister playing video games. And I was lucky that we had a very, very eccentric family friend who illegally burned us maybe over 200 plus PS1 video games and even some PC games. And a lot of them that inspired me were role-playing games, open world games, simulation games, these stories that were very colorful and very low poly count because it's PlayStation 1. The other thing that kind of affected my creative aesthetic in my childhood to my adulthood was screen printing. So being in a very rural town, didn't have the opportunities that some other people had, going to maybe like an art high school or had like a ceramics class or an AP art studio class. So my high school and middle school mainly had just like an art appreciation class and a drawing class. And I was trying to find other creative things that I could do, and one of them, I was very lucky that there was a vocational technical school next to my high school that allowed high schoolers to take courses at. And two courses that they offered that I took was a graphic design class and a screen printing class. And so I don't really have a good photo of like the silly t-shirts I made back then that, they're very cringy. But I ended up doing like a lot of like screen printed t-shirts of like music bands and musicians I really loved, and I would wear them around, and it was my one of my favorite things, and it kind of brought me to going to an actual private art uh, college. I ended up going to the Kansas City Art Institute for printmaking, but when I first went, I wasn't really sure what I was going into, whether it was graphic design, or printmaking. But by the end of the foundation year, I decided to go into printmaking. And I know that this image itself is not very printerly, it's very digital. Um, our printmaking department was very open to having a lot of interdisciplinary processes involved. And so I ended up doing a lot of digital printing um, of these kinds of landscapes that were inspired from the video games I had mentioned earlier. And I took a lot of the aesthetics of those games. So you can see that there's like grids and meshes, these kinds of like not high res landscapes. Um, there's also this signature, you can see in the background, the signature like 50% gray or darker gray that I use in a lot of this work. That's something I took away from software programs like Blender, which is a 3D software program that is open source, so it's free, and it still is free to this day. You can see that I also implemented things like clipping meshes. So um, clipping is kind of when you have like two or more 3D models that kind of collide, but they don't collide in a very realistic way in a video game or a virtual space. And so they just like intersect. And you can see that in this like pink landscape clipping into these other ones, or this uh, colorful landscape clipping into some of the other mountainsides. I Here's some clipping too, actually. I like this clipping because it kind of reminds me of like water runoff. And you can kind of tell that since I wasn't trying to make a video game, I wasn't really trying to think about the how it optimized the facets or the mesh was. A lot of video gamers, they have to think about the lower the poly count, the smaller the file is, the easier it is to load for the user, to the player. So you can see all these kinds of like randomized triangulations involved. I was really looking at also, I don't really reference a lot of artists, but at this time I was actually referencing a lot of like landscape aerial photographers. So think like Terry Evans or Stephen Shore. Um, some other things I was involved with when it came to 3D modeling, I was learning how to create these kinds of undulations in the landscape using like height maps and normal maps and texture maps, all these kinds of maps. You can see like this one's not as colorful as the last ones because I was trying to figure out textures. I was taking photos of, dirt, sand, snow, textures of like tree bark and using that to see what kind of forms I could create out of it. And then finally, I was making all these models. I was doing some digital prints, but I also knew I wanted to get into the handmade aspect of this. And I would bring it back into drawing or traditional printmaking process or even sculpture. So this image you can see, so this like central image or like central landscape I created using lithography and then drew some graphite landscapes next to it. There's a little bit of mono printing for the color. I masked out for the blue and the green. And you can still see that, there's a, a sort of grid pattern to create this sort of like mini map that you might see in a video game. I also tried to experiment in other things. I took a lot of random, but in a great way, a lot of random electives. I was really interested in casting and mold making. And so I took a mold making class and I learned how to make these sort of forms out of silicone, which I kind of liked because it gave me that, like, it gave a sort of, I know like ceramic is a very landscapey material, obviously, but I wanted something that seemed very artificial, like a digital print or these video game landscapes. So I went with silicone and I inserted some mesh or this grid, and then you can see the signature gray on the podium as well. Um, this silicone cast, I, took a rock from, I don't know, around my apartment and cleaned it off, made a little cast, and I was like, I want something extra with it. And you can kind of tell with there's this like plexiglass that I intersected it, and that's why there's this kind of reflection. And the thing I like about this one is that instead of it looking like a land mass, I like that it looked kind of like an iceberg drifting. And I used this actually as a model to create this larger print slash drawing. So once again, I did this sort of tonal graphite drawing in the center, but wanted to include some traditional printmaking. And so this rectangle was a masked out monoprint that I created my own transparent base and mixed it with some graphite powder so that it could blend in more with the drawing itself. And so this is like a really huge drawing that I ended up doing, I think like the fall of my senior year, or maybe the spring of my junior year. I think it's kind of also important to show something that is a little unfinished at the time. And so this is not a finished work. It's a ridiculous, creepy thing I made, trying to learn how to like map out a face and projection map the texture onto it. And it's creepy, it's unfinished, but the thing that was funny that when I did this, I didn't know that after college, I actually would end up getting a 3D printing and 3D scanning job. And so this is me, a self-portrait as a little screen printer with my little squeegee and my ink. The right is the model, and the left is clearly the 3D print. Um, so this job, I was very fortunate to get. It was very fun, very I, I learned so much from it. Um, the thing was that it was kind of it was meant for like people to come in, whether it's family or some, I can show you some extra stuff. So there's this rig where a family member could come in, a customer could come in, stand on the podium, and it's kind of a crazy, I'll say it's a crazy business model because at the time, this owner, he like bought over 100, I think 101 DSLR cameras and had this set up all the way around the podium, and that's a lot of money. And so this was a startup. It did not last that long. I was probably there for 7 or 8 months, but I learned a lot and I got a lot of connections out of it. And so you'll even know, or you'll probably see even today that there's a lot of other similar business ventures like this, except they are probably doing it in a more affordable way in the sense that they probably have like one to maybe even three DSLRs on like a swivel thing. And so it saved a lot more money doing it that way. So here you can see that we did a ballerina. We did a couple of athletes and a veteran. We did some quirky ones too. We did a dog that was somehow able to sit still long enough to have all the cameras shoot. And then we even had kids and even a mother who was pregnant and she wanted to have a memory of her body before having the kid. And it was kind of a sweet moment. So after 3D modeling or having that job, my partner Ruben Castillo, we actually met in printmaking at KCAI. He ended up going to grad school at KU, which is located in Lawrence, about 30 to 40 minutes west from Kansas City. And I know I'm not showing a lot of finished bodies of work at this moment, but I think this is the point of the fast part where it's very important for me to explain how like I was trying to go through a lot of financial survival at the time, trying to support both me and my partner while he goes through grad school. And this job is crazy. I started off as a salesperson at a metal cladding company. They like to do a lot of like patinaed metal. It can be for both exterior and interior. But this project was, I believe it's the Union Building at SUNY New Paltz in New Paltz, New York. And this, you can see this kind of bluish green color. That's the star blue copper that the company provided. This project was the Peterson Automotive Museum in LA. We had provided this kind of brushed stainless steel and the red powder coated aluminum. And I'm just this is like the third project, and um, you can kind of see this like modeled perforated metal. It's a dirty penny copper, so it's copper that's been patinaed. This is the De Young Museum in San Francisco. And so I ended up becoming an estimator there. I didn't really estimate on the larger scale projects like those three. I did more like sheet metal estimation. And so I ended up loving spreadsheets. And while I was there, not only was I learning like project management skills and estimating skills, I was also learning how to use AutoCAD, Rhino, Grasshopper, other software programs so I could learn how to do this kind of digital stuff that I do today. So this was me playing around. This isn't a finished thing, but just to get the point across, I was learning how to convert uh, Caspar David Frederick's Wander Above a Sea of Fog, one of my favorite paintings, into all these little perforations that were specifically used, like sized to the die that we had in the factory, just for practice. Um, so this is kind of a pivot. I'll bring it up again later, but just at the same time, while I was estimating and trying to support me and my partner, I was also I got the opportunity to curate at a local gallery in a flower shop in the arts district here or there in Kansas City called Bico Gallery, which is now known as the Waiting Room. And these are two write-ups of some of the shows that I did. It was kind of a lot. I realized I put a lot of pressure on myself at the time where so that the commute during so I told you it's like maybe 30, 40 minutes away. That's like from Lawrence to Kansas City. That's like on a nice no traffic day. Commuting to work during rush hour, it was like an hour there, hour back. And then I was also trying to do monthly shows. It was kind of a lot, and I learned maybe not to do that as much, but I learned a lot of about art writing and networking in the art community there. It's a very, very well connected community. And I kind of bring this artist curator perspective again to the place I ended up moving to, Troy, and I'll bring that up again later. I love it. So at a certain point, Zaner, I just realized I'm not a corporate girly. I'm not someone who can do an office. Like I need to be like making and not just taking customer facing phone calls and stuff. And so I ended up leaving the job and I had a friend who was very interested in sewing and I didn't know anything about sewing. I had actually maybe at that point only sewn like a pillowcase and that was like in middle school. And so I was like, okay, maybe I'll just ask my friend who is has a lot of sewing machines and who actually works at Bernina, and she still works at Bernina to this day. And I was like, can you teach us how to sew? And she did. And so the first things I ended up sewing were these boxer briefs and some shirts, and you can see my face clearly struggling with the serger. But it was such a enjoyable thing. I had never like imagined sewing garments. Like I wasn't thinking, oh, it's another element that I didn't know. It's similar to all the other things, like 3D printing is kind of fabrication, metal cladding and architecture is fabrication. This was another thing I feel like was me realizing I'm kind of interested in this sort of fabricating an object, a product thing. And so after I learned how to so I ended up going to I ended up being a sewer at a place that manufactures bikinis for female bodybuilders. So you'll see this really close-up shot of a bikini that's bedazzled. It's so crazy. Um, and I ended up learning a lot there. Like once again, I I kind of envision these jobs, even though they may not be like very artsy jobs. I try to envision them kind of like a residency. Like, what can I get from this skill wise that I can use at a time when I eventually am able to do it and I'm not like floundering for financial survival. And so you'll see this image on the left, I ended up being able to design a bikini. And then on the right is actually, I know it's a little risque of a photo, but I ended up getting my first commission selling this swimwear to someone just out of the blue from LA. Like I wasn't promoting myself as like, oh, let me sew something for someone. They just saw that I was like putting this on Instagram and they're like, hey, can you sew one for me? And so I was like, oh, you know what? Let me try it because why not? I really enjoy sewing. Maybe that can be my next thing. And so at the end of my time there, I actually ended up doing my first fashion show. This is just one look, but it was like a 5 look collection. And at the time, I didn't really know if I was going to do like the whole fashion show route. I wasn't sure if I would go back to art. I was kind of jaded. I'll be honest, I was kind of jaded about the art scene at the time. There's a lot of great artists there, don't get me wrong, but I saw some unethical things, some favoritism, and I probably gave myself a little bit of learned helplessness as well, and I acknowledge that. So during this time, I was trying to figure out who I was, what I was trying to deal with, and whatnot. And so I was like, let me try this fashion show. It was a really quick turnaround. It was probably like 2 or less, maybe 1 or 2 months total. And I was trying to learn how to, like, what the design workflow was for a fashion show. I was learning how to work with models, how to make things to measure. I was still kind of hacking and slashing patterns at this point. I haven't like dove deep into the deep end of pattern making yet, but it was such a great experience. I'm so happy I did it. So this is the second part of the presentation that I'm just going to say it's the slow part where I feel like I am slowing down, not in just the processes like hand sewing or figuring out like what sub mediums of like textiles or sub medium of fashion that I'm interested that can help better support the larger goal of just making whatever it is. And so I ended up doing some kind of going back to printmaking. This is printmaking in a way. Marbling. I had a friend who was teaching a marbling workshop, and I wanted to take it because I wanted something, well, for two reasons. One, I wanted something a little more custom. I'm very much a as much I'm very much a person who wants to wear very custom things, not necessarily couture. I'm not like that, but I really want something that looks cool, edgy, not something that you can just get from a store. And the second reason I did this class was actually because I this was my second commission. The bottom right corner was a musician who wanted a little cool psychedelic kind of shirt. And so I did these three fabrics. Um, One thing I should note also is that 2020 was the start of the slow period that I'm defining. And I'm defining it for so many reasons, not only slowing down for like the processes, but slowing down because everything, went to a halt. The whole Black Lives Matter, the COVID situation, all of it. Like I was getting very bogged down on just like being angry at systemic things, but also these workplaces that I felt were doing unethical things. And I was getting kind of upset about situations. And I am such like I'm not someone who likes to work at larger companies, so you'll see me jump from kind of one small local company to another until I ended up finding, you'll see later, that finding what I really enjoy. And this next job I ended up getting was actually I worked at a leather shop slash sex shop and ended up sewing a lot of leather goods. And it was really, really helpful to learn how this is completely different. Like I was used to sewing stretch fabrics. I didn't really even sew with wovens that much, but this is something that like leather, you can't really, you can sew it, but you can't, there's no edit undo. Like once you pierce a hole in it, is, it's perforated. So you have to make sure that what you're doing is correct. And so I would sew a lot of harnesses, collars, leather vests, things like that. And it involved a lot of hardware, grommets, um, but it came to a point where I even got to design some jock straps for the company. You'll see on the left, it's this black jock strap, and on the right, I was trying to sort of hint, hint, nudge, nudge to maybe include some color. But anyway, it was a really great experience to push me to out of my comfort zone of stretched fabrics, which is funny because uh, most people, if you don't know, most people who learn to sew, they are scared of stretched fabrics. They usually sew on wovens first. And to me, I'm like, I was so wrapped up in stretched fabrics, I was like, please let me do something else. Which kind of leads me to my second fashion show. So I was mentioning earlier how in around 2020, I was getting really bogged down by anger and like being frustrated at systemic things. One thing that really helped me was reading a book called Love and Rage by Lama Rod Owen. And I read some other books about like managing anger and like moving through it and acknowledging it, naming it, that kind of stuff. And one thing that also helped me while reading that book was learning how to make incense. And so you'll see on the right, there's these kind of incense cones and some incense sticks. And on the left was a kind of brush tip marker drawing that I did of an incense holder I made out of like some cheap like air clay or something. And I kind of used this as a mood board for my second fashion show. And so you'll see I ended up design. So these are two textiles I ended up designing. And the one on the left, you can see this sort of spiral shape. Um, was inspired by spiral incense, which is usually commercially seen as like for repellent for like mosquitoes and stuff. But there's also some other ones that are really nice, like lavender and whatnot. You'll see a lot of imagery in this collection that are like it's like sun candelabras, twin candles, twin flames, lots of things with fire. I wanted to stay away from the route of like, oh, I'm going to make a look that's about anger. So let me make everything red because red is angry. I was trying to think of another way of doing anger, and I thought since I'm already very familiar with athletic wear, might as well do what I know and try and make it kind of unique. And so I tried to do athletic wear that was a little spiritual. And so this was the one on the left. I ended up getting it outsourced because at the time, unlike this residency, I'm doing a lot of dye sublimation. I didn't have a way of doing that. So I outsourced that to be printed on some spandex. And then on the right, you'll see this is bull denim. So it's finally, I'm incorporating some other fabrics. And this one, I ended up getting screen printing these stars with the help of my partner Ruben and my friend Kate Horvat. They're both printmakers. So it was great that us three printmakers could hang and print make. And so here is some toiles, or another way of saying it is like pattern drafts. So I was really trying to not just focus on the textile design, but I was also trying to focus on the pattern making. So I bought a bunch of like pattern drafting books and tried to figure out how can I get to the point that I want with these looks that are that are a little off the wall. And so this one on the left is was inspired by like women's Olympic swimwear. And so there's this kind of thong cut style in the back. And then on the right was more of the printed denim, but in a different colorway. And these are actually pockets. And so they're in the same shape as the stars that they're printed on. So this left pocket, it's a little shallow, but the right pocket is very deep. And so I wanted to play with the silhouettes, not just the silhouettes, but like um, the way it was made. So I would add a lot of extra seams in certain places to give it a little more dynamic appearance. And so here's the first four looks. It was a 8 look collection. I was very proud of this. I did once again, I did not really have a sewing experience, like formally taught sewing experience, or like knew the correct workflow of doing a fashion show. And so I ended up doing the KC Fashion Week in 2023. And so you'll see some motifs like this star around the Racer One collar neck. Um, you'll see the front of this swimmer look. I kind of envisioned each person was like a specific athlete in some kind of way, not necessarily an Olympic athlete, but just an athlete. And I was like, how can I design it that way? So this was maybe like a gang of queer athletes or something. And one thing that was really cool about this whole collection was that so I don't know these people, and they gave me a model roster, and I just kind of picked people. And what I loved was that it actually ended up being a bunch like we're 100% queer, non-binary models, which was kind of a first for this kind of platform. And at the time, it was kind of a big deal, and I really loved it. We kikied a lot in the back. It was very fun. And to further stamp the point of this was very slow, like this was a whole 8 month process. And during this, I was also learning how to hand stitch just because I enjoy it. I had kind of no offense, a really shitty sewing machine, and I couldn't afford a more expensive one. And so hand sewing gave me that control so that there wouldn't, my machine wouldn't chew up the fabric. And so this tennis player look was fully hand sewn, and it gave me a new appreciation for sewing that I wasn't expecting. So here are the looks. I So after the fashion show, my partner ended up actually getting a tenure track position um, in Saratoga at Skidmore College. So we ended up moving to Troy, which is just a little south of Saratoga. And so he's now teaching in the printmaking area there. And you'll see how I kind of shifted completely from I feel like I'm more on track, very cohesive, more cohesive now. Uh, you can see I'm going to be making more like this is an art piece or what I would call an art piece because I feel like we are in a more stable position now and I feel more confident and just the fact that we moved, I guess something about my jadedness just completely got erased. And so the first year we were in Troy, I was like, okay, what I want this next year to be things that I learn that can maybe help me with textiles so I can maybe do some more advanced stuff with clothing. And so the art center there, they had a felting workshop and I made this piece. It's completely made from wool felt, Corriedale wool specifically. And it's wet felted with some dry felting techniques. But I ended up really loving this because I love that it kind of brings in the candles, the like I said in the fashion show, it's a lot of twin flames, candelabras, things like that. Um, this was not dyed after the fact, so I kind of the color wool was implemented into the felting process and then sliced away so you could see this kind of marbling effect. This piece called Kate Goodbye, I took a workshop, an online workshop from a weaver who teaches at Kent State in Ohio. And they were teaching specifically a workshop on how to create weavings from photographs or some other sort of tonal imagery that you can then outsource to a computerized loom called a TC2 Jacquard loom. And unfortunately, they're very inaccessible. I do not have access to one, and there's not really that many in the world. I mean, there's a good amount, but not like they're pretty rare. And so I learned this process being like, I don't know much about weaving. I know a lot about Photoshop, so I know I'd be comfortable with the workshop itself, but I want to see where this goes because maybe I can eventually outsource and make my own fabric. And so I took it, still didn't have a way of making the fabric itself, and so I ended up making this intaglio aquatint etching using it. So, like I said, my partner Ruben, he uh, is a teacher in a printmaking area. So I had access to copper plates and acid. And so we coated one with hard ground and then laser etched this image that I could essentially have given to a computerized loom to print, but instead I etched it into the ground of a copper plate and made this image. So you'll see in the background there's kind of a detail on the edge. There's a bunch of selvages, but minus the selvage weave, this whole image is actually made out of satin weaves, and I kind of wanted it for that gushy romantic feeling, not like lovey-dovey romance like partners, but like just this is an image of my partner embracing our friend Kate because she like helped us by coming with us on a road trip with our U-Haul across the US to help us move to our new place in Troy. And this was us saying goodbye to her at the airport, and I snapped it with like a disposable camera, and I really love this image. So the satin weaves kind of add to that gushy romance. And also, I ended up taking a natural dye workshop and wanted to dye this paper, this kind of like very, very light pink with cochineal, which is like a type of bug. And so that's this piece. I really love it. It's very sentimental to me. Um, I ended up getting a artist residency actually in Troy, the place I live, at 54th Street from Collar Works, as mentioned by Mary in the intro. And that experience was very helpful to me. I felt very isolated in being new to the art community there, and I ended up making a lot of new friends and a lot of artist networking opportunities with people. And I ended up making this quilt there by hand with the scraps that I used from my fashion show. I was kind of influenced by this quilter named Will Grimm, who does a lot of postage stamp quilts, but also I was influenced by my studio mate at the time in the residency, Victoria Vanderlaan, who does a lot of quilting. And you'll see that the stars from the fashion show are kind of broken down in this like chaotic fashion. And these hand beaded seed beads in the star shape, those were meant for the fashion show, but because it was such a slow process, I couldn't make enough for the idea I had envisioned, and I was waiting to use it for something. And instead, I made this kind of medium-sized quilt as an art piece, and I thought it was perfect for it. Um, my favorite part is this bottom left corner where the checkered pattern kind of breaks down. I think of this as kind of like some sort of spiritual ward kind of thing. Um, so yeah, this next print was a relief print that from the quilt, the way I made this quilt was a little chaotic. I mean, there is a pattern to it. You can see that there's a checkered pattern. But while I was piecing it, I wasn't like, oh, I definitely want this piece next to this piece. I was just like grabbing and going because I really wanted something very like, okay, don't think too much because you're going to let perfection be the enemy of good. So I didn't want that to happen again. So I kind of took the process of that randomness and made this print where I learned how to I think it was an Illustrator where I could create this kind of script that was like if I gave the Illustrator program these X amount of blocks, I can be like, here, can you randomize it in a certain way? And that's what kind of made this image. So it's a little less represent or I guess it's more representational. You can kind of see this. I thought of them as stars. I think some people can see as candlelight or fireflies even. But it's a little more representational than the like symbolic star I made in the fashion show. Um, you'll see these diagonal lines. It was the same thing as this piece, but instead of satin weave, they're twill weaves to reference the denim in the last piece. So I like to reference or at least find the thing I like in the previous piece I did and see more I can do with it. And that's what I did with this one. And because I found out how to do that randomized script, I actually made this risograph using that same kind of script. But instead of using like this sort of starry, glowy effect, I made an animation that would give me all these colorful gradients. And that's kind of the what I've been using here at my residency to create all these different blocked forms of color. And this piece for a glimpse of something pure. This risograph was actually part of a portfolio exchange called Queer Impressions, and I really love it. The size is a little strange, but that was the requirement of the portfolio exchange. And I kind of see this piece as I know other people would probably want to orient it like a tapestry, but I like it in landscape because I kind of think of it as like a risograph disguising as a textile. And also, it kind of reminds me of how your iPhone when the storage of it, it tells you like this much storage is photos, this much storage is videos or whatever. I kind of see it like this. It's like it's measuring something, but what is it measuring? I'm not sure. And so to bring back what I mentioned earlier when I was artist curating at that flower shop, I wanted to ma find a way to be more in the community in Troy where I moved. There wasn't a huge art scene. There is an art scene, but it's not as big as I would like it to be. We are a capital. We are in the capital region of New York, so I would hope that it would be really huge. And so, with that networking opportunity through the 54th Street residency, I was able to find another local artist named Cecilia Liu, who ended up, we are co-organizers of the studio visiting group that we've been doing for over a year now, where every other month we have one or two artists that we go to their studios and we give crits or we do show and tells. It's really up to the artist to decide what they want from the visit. But it's been a hit. It's been very helpful. Makes us feel less isolated. I know that's a big thing with a lot of the artists there who are in the group. They feel like they know that there's a lot of artists, but they haven't had a reason to like they want something easy to go to and be like, oh yeah, hey, hi, nice to see you again. What have you been working on? Kind of a thing. And so we started that, I think, last year, 2024 in July. Last month, I ended up curating a show with people, members of the group, at and we did this show called Worlds Within Worlds at a local artist-run gallery space in Troy. And this is just a couple of the images from it. It was I really loved it. It was a very great show, great turnout, and something that I find really important right now, at least in the capital region, is that there's not a lot of documentation of work. And so I think a big part of my practice, not just as an artist, but as a curator, I don't want just to like do a show, put it up, install it, do the show, deinstall it, and then let it just kind of vanish in the ether. And so on the left, you'll see I as a cover of a exhibition catalog I made for the show so that not just the artist, but people in the community could get um, so that they could remember the show. It had art writing by me and the some notes from the gallerist in it as well. And then on the right, you'll see we did a little artist talk. I not just documentation is important, but I also feel like there should always be at least one sort of programming thing that's related to the show so that not only for networking, but just to get people to come to the show again, n not just for the opening, but like some other time. And we did an artist talk panel where I ended up asking questions to some of the participating artists, and it was a big hit as well. And so that is all I have. I did want to leave one last note of like this is an image of something I've been working on here at the residency, and I'm very excited with what I've been making so far. So yeah, thanks for being here.
Yay, thank you so much, Dustin. That was so cool to see like where you were started and all your whole journey.
Thank you.
We did have
Especially because
some
like
questions in the chat if you want to
Okay,
touch on those.
let's do it.
yes, we have a question from Miles.
Hmm.
He said, queer ancestry, fascinating, simply entitled. Can you explain your thoughts on its meaning?
Yes. So I wouldn't say every single work I've done is queer ancestry related, but I will say like the after doing the second fashion show, I realized while I was reading all those books about anger and forgiveness and like working through things, I realized I wanted to do more um, work involved with that just because it's a big part of my upbringing. I didn't really say much, but I'll be honest, I ended up estranging my family um, about 10 years ago, not because they were like homophobic or whatever, but for other reasons. And I think part of queer ancestry is also, dealing with loneliness, dealing with anger, trying to find your own shared family or found family. And I feel like a lot of slow processes like quilting or um, the fashion show having models as that, I feel like it's really important to keep that going. And that's why I'm hoping that when I do other shows in the future that I can touch on that a little more uh, heavy-handedly, I'll say.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah, it was really cool to hear about all the community stuff you do. It sounds fun and like inspiring. Honestly, I want to try to do stuff like that in the future.
Yay.
Um, I had a question, kind of like as a student right now, I'm also like exploring like what I do and like the power I find in my art. And I was wondering if there was like ever a piece or like a moment for you when you're making your art where you kind of like there was like a breakthrough perspective maybe on your art and like the power it has. Like, was there like kind of like I don't know, like a breakthrough moment you
I would, s-
felt?
I think that's the thing I was trying to say with the start of the slow processes. It was hard for me to figure out to say.
Yeah.
I feel like it had to do when I stopped worrying about what I thought I needed to have as like a gallery artist. So a lot of gallery artists, they kind of this isn't no shame to anyone, but they do the whole I gotta apply to this, gotta apply to that, gotta chug out work a lot. Let me apply again, apply to this, apply to that, chug out work a lot. I'm someone who I feel like I realized I needed to take it slow, maybe I would say a few years ago when I was trying to get back into it, when I moved to Troy, I realized, oh, I don't have all this like baggage of the jadedness that I used to have living in KC, and I can just go at my pace because it doesn't matter. Like I can go apply to a couple shows that I feel like I have a good chance of getting versus like shotgunning applications or trying to push out a lot of work that I think does work for some people's methods or workflows, but my workflow is like, I want to sit and stew a little. I like to do that.
Yeah. Cool.
I actually had a question too. So,
Yeah.
I really love the pattern and the way your work is like, even through fashion and then moving from fashion to these now more recent art from you. It's like very focused on the surface and pattern work. So I was
Mhm.
gonna ask, I know you're still experimenting in the IEA with different, mediums and patterns and stuff like that. But where do you see most of your work moving forward? Do you think you'll go back to fashion? Do you think you'll keep moving through print? What do you think? Any ideas?
I think I will probably take the tiniest pause in fashion because I am really excited with how I've been utilizing the dye sublimation stuff lately. For those that don't know, like this image on the screen right now, I've been making a lot of uh, prints where it's dye sublimated gradients on top of bridal satin fabric, and then it's adhered to a traditional like Reeves BFK paper. And I've been really loving it because it has this kind of sheen effect. So it reads as it's I feel like it's a good combination of all the things I mentioned in this presentation, where it's got a little bit of my digital, it's got a little bit of my like the video game aspect. To me, it does, at least, maybe not to everyone, but I can see some video game references in here.
Yeah, definitely.
It has some fashion aspects, it's got some quilting, and it's got a reference to print. I know dye sub is definitely print, but I just mean like it reads as like a rich, I don't know, screen print or something to me. So I kind of like that. So I'll probably
Yeah,
go
I can
that
definitely see
direction.
those influences. Yeah, 100%. That's
When you
awesome.
when you say it like still references like the video game influence, do you
Mhm.
think it's like the visual aspects of it, like the colors and shape
It's the
playing a
colors. Yeah. I don't go in thinking like, let me reference a video game. I mean, I
Yeah.
did in undergrad, but now I feel like I can just see it. Like in this print specifically, I can just see so many like Chrono Cross, Chrono Trigger. I can see Wild Arms where there's like this teleportation. I can even see, I didn't really play Mega Man. My partner loves Mega Man. I can see some sort of teleportation thing with Mega Man, some sci-fi stuff. With this print specifically, with the like that glow
Yeah,
that's going
I totally
vertical.
get that. That's so cool.
Yeah, awesome. Any other final questions in the chat? If not, I think we're ready to conclude.
Oh my
Mary, you
gosh.
want to wrap up?
Yes, so timely. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Dustin, again, for taking your time talking with us.
Hmm.
And again, for anyone, Dustin's Instagram is in the chat, so go check it out, drop a follow, like some posts. Um,
Like and subscribe.
yes, like and subscribe. Also, this artist talk is recorded, so it will always be available for anyone who wants to rewatch or you want to like be like, hey, you guys, watch this. It will be up and it will be on the IEA YouTube channel by the end of the week. And there will also probably be a link on Dustin's page on the IEA website when we get that up.
Mhm.
So thank you everyone for joining and listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much, Dustin.
everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you.